I really loved how they approached the class.
Mhm.
How there was a multifaceted approach to teaching through different text articles, academic readings, but also the poems and the music. And
Mhm.
that really helped me to see from different perspective and experience from different perspectives this learning. And of course the yarning circles, those were good.
Everything we are studying has a transformative motivation, right? We are not here as, let's say, typical academic or scientific truth-seeking person. I think many of us want to transform and improve society, and I think we should use the modalities of society, not academics modality, right? And
I agree.
I think they totally embrace with that, and you can be rigorous and honest, but at the same time not only expressing transformative ideas by articles, right, or a PowerPoint, but through stories, through music, through poems, through painting. I think it's very approachable, and at the end it connects with many more people, right? So I personally would take that for me. If at the end we want to communicate change, academic papers are only one way and for one audience, right? And I think it was related to the linking to not much learning to sitting on a chair and listening to the master and taking notes, but embracing other modalities. So I think it's essential. It's essential.
I kept thinking that the way that they were teaching was teaching from the heart and not from the head. I mean, we're not just we were given the opportunity to embody a lot of the experiences, the lived experiences people were having, instead of just intellectualizing it, which is most of what the master's was. And you said in a post that I was reading, I think on LinkedIn, that you wrote, but we have enough research, we have enough, and not that we don't value or need more. There's always something that we can learn, but through stories we can connect to people so that this transformation can happen. Like even grounding the class in the brief, and then coming back to the end where there was a summary of what happened, so we can be connected not only from the beginning to the end, but all of it. It was beautiful.
And you see here that it's the most important thing is to connect. Yes. I can clearly see that the most important thing is to exchange ideas and to leave the room with permeating yourself with what other stories from other people are, and they also how they absorb what we were sharing, and hey, they carefully listen to it, whether it was in a paper or not, or whoever write that idea. The importance is the idea, not from which platform it comes. I think it's a role model, and I do believe that this is how we should approach it. No, very well. Stories can move billions of humans, right? And this is the difference, right? So other animals are not moved by the narrative or of someone. They may work as a group, but the capacity to mobilize groups that are thousands of miles between each other, it's a story. The story is the nexus. And if we are not able to translate research into mobilizing stories, we are not going to succeed, right?
In many, many movements, we're stuck in the conveying the facts and the data, especially the climate crisis, and we're not connected to the stories that will create the emotions that connect us to that movement. We might feel the anger or the sadness, but not we're connected to the feeling from the facts, but not the stories that connect us to mobilize.
there are other perspectives that I think are better to build bridges. So we tend to polarize, even if we criticize dualisms, nature versus humans, capitalism, communism, and this false dichotomy, you need to choose A or B. We tend to put sides and make always a bilateral decision. For example, when we talk about decolonization or colonization, we try to put it only in territorial terms, not in historical terms, not in social terms, which the snapshot on the understanding that someone can has is different. What is important is that we both recognize our struggle and we work together, even if we have different ways to approach it, to decolonize everywhere, right? From the universe, from development, from imperialism, from the undemocratic forces of capitalism, right? It doesn't matter that you share or not the same struggle, as long as we recognize each other, and also accepting that losses that I'm not directly approached or I cannot fully understand are also my losses, right? So what we discussed in the last class, losing Catalan or indigenous language, it's a general loss. Also, Spaniards lose it, right? Also, the dominance, the violent actors lose from that, no? And if we see as every loss as our loss, I think it creates automatically breaches.
Yarning circles, we were with Shivani, and I shared that I didn't feel the connection. And I think the way you were just describing how we can see it as our collective struggle or is important, because I was describing how, as my identity as an American and my identity as a Filipino, I didn't feel rooted in either. That a lot of people still need to find in their own identities to embrace this global connectedness, I think, in order for it to be authentic. And if finding my own connectedness to all of this has been a little, I know on the surface how I connect, but because I don't really feel that rooted, it doesn't feel like a strong foundation necessarily. So
yes, I think it's a consequence of many of us. It's really funny because when I was a kid, or during when I was younger, I do believe that those people like raised with me in a small town and never moved, they were behind, right? They were the ones that doesn't embrace modernity, that doesn't embrace technology, international changes. Like that was the only way to have a interesting life, right? And when no one told me is that the result of that prioritization of international mobility, modernity, it results to the feeling that you just said, which is I don't belong. Like I don't belong. And I really have a hard time to say that I'm from Barcelona, because for me, Barcelona, it's a factory, right? It's a place where I get to study, where I see my parents working their ass off, but it was not a welcoming city where I feel connected, right? And where we build roots, where we have a sense of belonging. And funny enough, these towns where I happened to live before, where my peers don't want to live, right? Even if it's at the expense of not having the career I did have, they are really much more connected. They have a sense, and they see work as not as an identity, but as a means to something. It's just a mean, right? And I think this group, I would say particularly in the global north, and also that we are privileged in the sense that we get to get well-paid jobs, and even we can consider many times fun what we are doing, but that becomes our identity, which is very problematic because the relationships are monetary at the end, right? Like,
yes,
all these people spending 20 years working in tech companies, and they were fired one day. They cannot access the laptop. They were excluded for the people they spent the last 20 years, and they are lost, right? And they are lost because they don't have this sense of rudeness. And you don't have to go that dramatic, like just us, which probably we have a relatively smooth professional life. We still have this feeling of lack of engagement with the land. And this is what I think we need to relearn and stop celebrating this accelerated mobility that only prioritize work over family and the land, right?
yeah.
So I'm happy I realized now and not way later, but there was many years I thought they were the ones behind, we are the ones ahead.
Yes.
And now I'm also considering, like, what is the generation of my daughter gonna do, right? So are they gonna celebrate hypermobility, globalization as a given, or are they still connecting and not being a nationalist, but at the same time recognizing that it's okay not to take all the opportunities? It's okay to stay. Actually, it's even desirable, because not connected means you don't get to see your parents. You get to lose friendships. You belong nowhere. You are like capital, right? You are flowing in the market based on what the market says you got to be doing, right? Which is, for me, is really violent. We don't know when we talk about, of course, it's much more obvious and it's much more urgent, the violence happening in the land in many places in the global south. But I think in order to create that connection of struggles, I think it's much more convincing to say you are also losing. You, person in the north, that are privileged and you get to benefit from our exploitation, you don't feel belonging. You are far from your family. Yeah. You lack the sense of place I do have.
Yes.
So maybe something I like from Giovanni is that we should not delink everything, and we need to place concretely what do we link with. And
the idea of belonging is so critical to us as a species that despite what some people in the global south lack in terms of material possessions, etc., there, in some ways, life is something to aspire to in terms of community, in terms of belonging, because I think so many people in the global north are lost. And I loved your metaphor or analogy of we're like the monetary, we're like capital, just moving, and then that really made sense to me, just as you said that, and us to make decisions from a place of sufficiency and not scarcity, like just, oh no, I'm just gonna not see the whole picture and grab this or grab that, or aspire to a global north. Have that foundation of belonging. The shiny objects don't seem as appealing. You can it's what we're doing to them what we're doing to them as global north to global. That's the
come from a scientific background, there is a trend to universalizing, right? We even say the word universalizing services.
Yeah.
And I also like that here is again pointed out that the goal is not to universalize what needs to be done, is to go to a place listening first and trying to understand and ask humbly, what do you need? what are your struggles?
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is essential to really, at the end of the day, help discover and let the pluriverse exist.
Mm-hmm.
Because even if you don't directly attack that, but if we, let's say, come with a very successful theory of how the growth needs to happen everywhere, there is the risk of that being co-opted and used everywhere, right? And I think this will be also a loss, right? So the goal, it's not to put only CO2 down. The goal is not to increase biodiversity. The goal is to let life with uppercase flourish,
Mm-hmm.
and let alternative and diverse ways of seeing life and living life to coexist.
Mm-hmm.
Right? This is the biggest expression of democracy for me, because at the end is respect. It's not that a bunch of people agree to not respect someone, because this is the current democracy. It's like a bunch of people vote to a party which explicitly dominate and impose ways of living to even their own, within their own country, but also across all other countries. But rather to say, we are here to help. We would love to learn. We would love to share our knowledge. We would like to learn from you. And we decide each other, what do we take and what do we give? But no one imposes on us. And I think this is key. And actually, I find the idea of the pluriverse and the right for the pluriverse even stronger than degrowth.
Mm-hmm.
Because degrowth at the end, even if it's sensible, respectful with the pluriverse, it's directed against an economic idea,
Mm-hmm.
and it reuses the opposite of that economic idea. And even if it's a prognosis, it's not encapsulating in the word the right of diversity, the right of complexity.
Mm-hmm.
So pluriverse and the right of rebellion, yes, to emphasize that we expand a common sense that property goes beyond life,
Mm-hmm.
which is crazy if you think about it. Like, life should go before any type of property, and but we are ruling, and we are managing societies in a way that the protection of properties and some laws, and even the protection of a system which is social, it's not natural, it's more important than life itself.
What I'm learning is that the ways, the models for which we're aspiring to now are the models of the indigenous people, of our ancestors who were able to keep the earth in a healthy condition, and communities much better and thriving. And those models told through stories, through generations, are how we are able to be respectful of each other and the earth and all. And it's through this, I resonate with song, like the songs that they were sharing through these classes were great. And I bring that up because the Worrell Creek song that they shared in the, I think it was in the embodying class. It was an indigenous woman from Australia, and she sang. I didn't understand a thing she said, but the feeling and the emotions that it elicited were still powerful. And I even if we don't share that language, we can share it through song. And still inspire. There was a song called Quiet that became the rallying cry for the women's movement in the US. And it was by, what I love was by an Asian American woman. And in preparation for this class, I Googled it again, and what, 5 years later, I'm crying again. I'm transported back to the struggle of that march, but also the importance of it. I'm getting a little emotional now. And why we marched in the first place. And I'm just gonna show this in case we don't have very much time. This is the jacket. I was basically a walking billboard for during the march. I wouldn't consider myself an artist, but definitely a creative person. And I decided to wear all white, and I brought markers because I wanted to share the experience, not just all of us walking forward, because that was how the march goes. I wanted to do a 360 and really just engage with people around. That's how I thought about doing it. And people were writing their truths on me, mostly young, but definitely some older people too. And that created that connectedness, and it felt the power of the march. I was wearing it, and those voices were coming through on what they on my body. That was what I was going to write about if I wrote the article. But it was through the song that I listened to again that I can hear, that really helped motivate me. We talked earlier at the beginning of this thing. What can motivate us through stories, through that connection, and song is really something that is so foundational to me.
I think this march, and also what we were hearing about the movement Ni Una Menos in Argentina, and also now with the law solo CSC, so only when you give explicit approval, then it doesn't become a violation, right? And before in Spain, you need to prove that there was some violence, or only when actually you have symptoms or almost you risk your life, you can be protected, right? And for me, that shows the physical nature of the struggle. I think it's also very powerful. We need to express that this violence is affecting our bodies. It's expressing on the 1,000 women that this year died in Spain only through masculine violence. It is expressed by the fact that many women don't feel safe going back at home, or they don't feel safe walking or running in the streets alone, which is a violation of a very basic right. And the continuous violence that we see in evictions, in projects for development. And I think it's very, very important to relate to physical violence and to connect. And
is one of the words that my mantra all of my life has been around freedom of choice, freedom as a woman who has experienced violence towards, physical violence against myself. Freedom mentally and physically has always been so important. The state I've adopted now is the motto is live free or die. And there are definitely, it's a blue state, but there are definitely Trump supporters here. But I think, as you were saying, everyone can rally and connect with the idea of freedom of choice, freedom. And if we can focus on that, we all want that freedom to make those choices for ourselves in our communications. Back to communication.
Basically, the idea of the song is to explain that if we all pull the regime, it will fall, no? And it used the metaphor of a rope, no? Like we are all pulling, and then the world will fall. And I sing it as a going to bed song to my daughter for many reasons, right? It doesn't take sides. It's just a claim for freedom, right? And it gives her the freedom to choose, but it shows the importance of union, right? Of involving change, of unsettling, of working together against tyrannous regimes in favor of freedom, and not the freedom some people co-opted, right? freedom of capital, but instead the freedom of life, the freedom to be a woman with full right, the freedom to choose love, the freedom to have clean air, healthy water, prosperity, access to basic goods and services, the freedom to choose your culture, your language, and I think it's also a discourse that we should embrace much more, because we only about CO2 and decoupling and absolute decoupling this is very powerful. Like
la Vicisseta em parlava de bon matí al portal, mentre el sol esperaven i els carros veien passar. Siset, que no veus l'estaca on estem tots lligats, si no podem desfer-nos-en mai no podrem caminar. Si estirem tots ella caurà i molt de temps no pot durar. Segur que tomba, 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 ben corcada deu ser ja. Si tu l'estires fort per aquí i jo l'estiro fort per allà, segur que tomba, tomba, tomba i ens podrem alliberar. Però Siset, fa molt temps ja les mans se'm van escorxar i quan la força se me'n va, ella és més ampla i més gran. Ben cert sé que està podrida, però és que Siset costa tant que cops la força m'oblida. Torna'm a dir el teu cant. Si estirem tots ella caurà i molt de temps no pot durar. Segur que tomba, 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 ben corcada deu ser ja. Si tu l'estires fort per aquí i jo l'estiro fort per allà, segur que tomba, tomba, tomba i ens podrem alliberar. La Vicisseta ja no diu res, mal vent que se'l van portar. Ell qui sap cap a quin indret i jo a sota el portal. I quan passen els nous bailets estiro el coll per cantar el darrer cant d'en Siset, lo darrer que em va ensenyar. Si estirem tots ella caurà i molt de temps no pot durar. Segur que tomba, tomba, tomba